Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live, women and entrepreneurs of color routinely miss out on over 70% of capital funding. We speak with a prominent investment banker who wants to change that. Plus, media mogul and philanthropist Tyler Perry gets candid about his first encounter with bias in the workplace. All of that and your questions coming up next. Hello, I'm Devin Banerjee, and welcome back to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. It's Tuesday, February 9th. Here's a quick look at the top headlines professionals are talking about today. Bitcoin surges after Tesla purchase. Reddit announces $250 million in new funding. And another disease's toll deepens in the United States. Let's take a deeper dive into that last story and what it means for those in the industry. The pandemic is deepening the emotional and financial pain for Alzheimer's patients' families. According to Barron's, 1/3 of COVID deaths in the US have happened at long-term care facilities, where about half of residents battle some form of dementia. One estimate has the disease's economic toll at $305 billion last year. This story generated a lot of engagement on the LinkedIn platform. LinkedIn member Claudio Brocato, who's head of global equities at Nuclear Independent, said, "It seems to me that we are increasingly faced with challenges to which there are simply no good or easy answers or solutions, only the ones with the highest possible net positive score." For more stories like these, check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed, or if you're on mobile, click into the search box. All week, we're highlighting the accomplishments and career paths of Black professionals for our series, Conversations for Change. Our guest editor this week, Tyler Perry, spoke with his good friend and CBS This Morning co-host, Gayle King, about when he first experienced racism at work.
This is my first experience with racism. I went to interview at this hotel, and I had never had a job outside of things around the house or working at a pet shop. And I'm on the streetcar riding down to, but don't let me forget to tell you where the story's going.
Yeah.
I'm on the streetcar riding to do the interview, and I meet this young white kid. We're about the same age. And we're talking, he's got the paper. That's when you looked at the paper for jobs. I said, "Yeah, I'm going down to look for a job." He said, "Yeah, I'm going to." I said, "I'm going to try for the valet." He said, "Yeah, I'm going to try for valet too, but I don't have my driver's license. I can't drive." I said, "Oh yeah, I got my driver's license. I could drive." Anyway, we go in, I go in first, and the person who was interviewing me, she said, I said, "I want to do the valet job." And she said, No, you're big and strong. We need you in housekeeping.
Wow.
That job has already been filled. And I was honored that she would give me a job. So I took the job in housekeeping. So I'm leaving, I get on the streetcar, I'm going home, and that white kid gets on the streetcar. He's so happy. He went in after me. I said, "Yeah, that job was filled." He said, "No, I got it."
No, wow.
Yeah. He said, and he was
I
like,
never heard this. Wow.
Yeah, I got to go learn how to drive so I can be the valet at the hotel. So when I got to the hotel, I realized that there were no Black people in the front of the house. It was all white people. It was all white staff, bellmen, everything. The Black people were only in the back of the house. And so there I am working at this hotel in this, angry about it. And the NAFTA convention comes to town, the National Association of Television Programming, where all of these syndicators would come, shows would come to go to syndication. Yeah. And I'm there, and the person that has inspired me and encouraged me all those years, as if she were my best friend, is coming to the hotel, and that's Oprah. So Oprah comes to the hotel, and I got a chance to actually see her in person, which blew my mind, right? So when you talk about dreams and hopes, nobody thought she could do what she was doing.
Yeah.
Me in that moment, working there, standing there, vacuuming in the hall, waiting for her, leaning up against the wall. Listen, I knew she was coming. I vacuumed that hallway so much that they called down to complain that I was vacuuming for hours. So I turned the vacuum off and stood and was just pushing it back and forth as if I was vacuuming, knowing she was coming. And then I found a badge from someone who had left, and I went to the convention on the last day as one of the delegates. And I'm in and I'm walking around and I was blown away. I got to meet Pat Sajak.
Oh my gosh, Tyler.
But where's all this going? What I'm talking about here is understanding that Oprah had gone into syndication. All of these moments were leading me to what I was supposed to be doing. I wanted to be the man who owned the house. I didn't understand what syndication was. So when I did my first show, my first television show, I said, I want 100 episodes. That's all I'm going to accept because I want to go into syndication. And people were like, Tyler, that's not how it goes. You have to do 20, you get an episode of 12. And if that works, first you get a pilot, and that's one. And then you get 12, and then maybe you get 24. And over 4 or 5 years, you get to 100. But I was able to get to 100 episodes with House of Pain because I knew and understood what syndication meant. So
Wow.
I said all of that to say
Yeah.
that you talk about a dream, you talk about a hope. There are all these moments that point you to your dream, right? So if it's in you, you can't let it go. This is something that you know is going to happen. There are going to be signs all along the way. And if you're not getting those signs, I think you may need to rethink it. But there are always signs that tells you this is what you're supposed to be doing. Keep going.
That was our guest editor this week, director, writer, and philanthropist, Tyler Perry. One way to combat workplace bias is to have representation across jobs and industries. In entrepreneurship, that often means making access to capital and potential investors easier. Our next guest today has made it her mission to do just that. Carla Harris is Vice Chair of Global Wealth Management at Morgan Stanley and co-head of the Multicultural Innovation Lab. Carla, welcome back to LinkedIn News Live.
Well, thank you, Devin, for having me. I'm glad to be back.
It's great to see you. Carla, we just heard Tyler Perry's recount one of his early encounters with bias in the workplace. I'm curious, Carla, when you first entered the financial services industry, this was about 35 years ago, did you see many others who looked like you?
No, there were not a lot that looked like me. In fact, I could pretty much name every Black manager director on all of Wall Street, not just within my firm, but on all of Wall Street. And I'm happy to say that while progress might have been a little bit slow over these last 30 plus years, I cannot do that today. So that tells you a lot about how there has been some progress. I can't name everyone, a lot of them, but not everyone. But you could do it with a couple of hands back then.
Absolutely. I'm curious, Carla, what are some of the challenges that remain today in financial services as it relates to inclusion and belonging? And what do you see as some of those effective solutions?
Well, I'll tell you, I get that question all the time, Devin, about why we aren't farther along in financial services with respect to diversity and inclusion. And I'll tell you, my personal opinion is that it has largely been a bull market phenomenon in financial services. So when things are going really well, there is a big focus on diversity and inclusion, a big focus on hiring people and getting them into the pipeline. But here's the problem. In financial services, my view is that every 4-ish years, there's an infraction to the market. There is a decline in the market. So just think about it. I started in 87. There was one in 91. There was one in 94 and 95. There was another one, obviously, 97, 98, then 2001. And then obviously, you know about what transpired in, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And every time that happens, there are reduction in forces, there's restructurings, and you lose part of your people. Not to mention there's competitive threats where people come to take your great people. And then you look up and you're about to go back into a bull market environment and you have no pipeline. You have 1 or 2 people. So you, in effect, have to start all over again. So I believe that you need 3 things if you're going to have a successful D&I program. You need intentionality, accountability, and consistency. And the consistency is across all economic cycles.
Absolutely. Very, very important points there. Carla, I want to bring up a few charts on how Black-owned businesses continue to struggle with access to capital, as I mentioned earlier. We're taking a look here at just the proportion and that delta in white entrepreneurs accessing business loans from banks or other financial sources of startup capital. We also have a chart here on the cost of capital for different businesses. We can see that Black entrepreneurs report being negatively impacted by that higher cost of capital, quite a delta there. And so I'm curious, Carla, you are spending a lot of time working on increasing this access to capital for multicultural entrepreneurs. What are some of the solutions there and best practices that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Devin, I had the privilege of being asked by my chairman 4 years ago to start a multicultural innovation lab. And in the lab, we bring in early stage companies that have been founded by people of color and women, and we give them three things. We give them cash. We also give them 6 months of content that will help them to develop between being a founder and a CEO, because as you know, there is a difference. And we also connect them to some of our largest investment banking clients to advance the scaling of their business. And I will tell you that in addition to the capital, what's really needed with some of these early stage founders is the how-to, connecting them with outstanding mentors, people who have been in the business for 20 or 30 years that can talk to them about how to build a company, how to define a culture, how to build a culture, how to hire for the right people, because a poor hire in an early stage company can be devastating. So those are some of the things that are needed to help these entrepreneurs be successful. But the access to capital is still an issue. So I think more companies should think about how they can leverage their own superpowers to help some of these companies that are emerging in these industries.
I love that concept of superpowers, because every company has them, as you said, and every person has them as well.
That's right.
And we will get into that in terms of mentorship and sponsorship and allyship. I want to take a moment to just say hello to some of those joining us in the stream. Khaled from Riyadh, Sagar from India, Samia from France, Kyle from Houston, Sue from California. Clearly, Carla, you have fans all around the globe. Michelle Mulling says, Carla Harris, always love your pearls of wisdom. Mark Cohen says Carla Harris is amazing. So some great advice already being passed along. Thank you, Carla. Let's talk about that mentorship that you just mentioned. You have become a mentor, a sponsor, an ally to so many in the industry, as well as these entrepreneurs that you're helping. What advice do you have, Carla, for those people who have good intentions, they want to practice allyship, but they just don't know where or how to start?
Yes, I will tell you, Devin, I believe that leaders today have an outsized opportunity to instigate the courageous conversations. Now is the time to say, as a leader, I'm not sure what I should do here, or I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about what transpired. Can you give me 15 minutes and walk me through what's going on in the broader world? How are you thinking about it? How it's impacting you? Now is the time to exercise those leadership rights. And you can find that you will find that people will be more than willing to sit down and have a conversation. So the advice that I gave, Devin, to people who wanted to be allies was to listen, act, and repeat.
That's absolutely great advice. And have you seen, I mean, over the past 9-10 months, as you know, Carla, last summer we had this collective reckoning over racial injustice. I mean, have you seen just around you or in the industry at large, or just in your circles, have you seen people get better at having these courageous conversations?
Absolutely. My phone started ringing off the hook as early as April when we went into this shelter in place environment. How do I lead in this moment? How do you motivate people when you aren't under the same roof? How do you define or refine a culture when your people are not together? And then after the terrible tragedy with Mr. Floyd, the phone calls really accelerated. You know, what do I say now? We've never spoken out about this. I'm afraid of making a foot fault, offending, showing my ignorance. And what I said to leaders is that at a minimum, you have to do three things. You need to be visible. You need to be transparent about what you know, what you don't know, and when you know it. And you need to be empathetic. Now is the time to have that conversation. When you exercise your courage to ask that question, then somebody will exercise and give you their grace to answer it. And now you're going to start to have a breakthrough in that environment.
I want to also touch on something you mentioned a few minutes ago, Carla, which is the pipeline, a very important, obviously the entryway into these industries, whether it's financial services or soon to be entrepreneurs. How do we work on that pipeline, on getting early career professionals or even pre-career professionals confident, motivated, and inspired to know that they can enter these industries and succeed?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to tell you, Devin, most companies are good at building the pipeline. And if you haven't started to build a pipeline, then obviously getting in the way of the traffic, spending time building relationships at the historically Black colleges, spending time even on majority campuses and getting to know the organizations where the African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asians, American Indians, everybody is congregating. Every school has one. And get to know the students, get to know the culture, get to understand what they're interested in. So if you don't have a pipeline, That's how you can do it. The other thing you can do is to partner with organizations that have outstanding students. They've already done the work for you, whether it's an SEO or a Jackie Robinson Foundation or a Better Chance or a Robert Twigo Foundation, especially in your financial services. You ought to know those 4 organizations. Partnering with those organizations will also give you access to a pipeline. But the trick, Devin, is not just getting them in the pipeline and recruiting them, it is retaining them. And that's where you have to check the house. Because what I've said to many CEOs over the last 11 months, if the women and the people of color in your organization aren't selling for you, i.e. they aren't bringing great talent to you, you should check the house.
Absolutely. I want to take a moment to say hello to some other viewers joining us, friends from Haiti, Margaret from California, Danielle from Texas, Jacqueline from New York. Thanks so much for joining us. A reminder to those tuning in that you can put your questions for Carla in the comments in the stream, and I'll do my best to pose some of those to her during this conversation. Christine in the stream says, Strategize to Win was an invaluable book for her to read. Carla, you've written several books. What's inspired you to write?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Devin, I was inspired to write those books because there were so many pearls, as I like to call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls that I did not know when I started on Wall Street in 1987. I bought the whole concept of a meritocracy, which every company sells. All you have to do is be smart, work hard, you can go straight to the top. But that was not a complete success equation. So those pearls that I acquired the hard way, I wanted to share with other people because I knew I couldn't be the only person that didn't know these things, yet these things were critical to maximizing your success. So I wrote about things such as perception is the co-pilot to reality. Your authenticity is your distinct competitive advantage. You have to put points on the board in your first 90 days. Understand the difference between the advisor, the mentor, and the sponsor. And in Strategize to Win, I think one of the most valuable pearls is the fact that there's 2 types of currency in any environment: performance currency and relationship currency. And you should understand the difference and the relative value of the 2.
Yeah, relationships. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's absolutely fundamental to all of the success that I've witnessed from leaders in different industries. And I'm curious, I had a conversation recently, Carla, where someone said early career professionals sometimes struggle balancing that networking and that relationship element with also just doing their day-to-day job very well and succeeding day to day. How do you advise younger professionals in terms of how to balance those 2?
Absolutely. Well, you already have a team of people that are committed to your success, which is the people that recruited you into the organization. So it could be a school team, it could be an HR team, but whoever that group of people happens to be, you start to build your relationship with them. And within that circle, now you say, hey, Michelle, who are 2 other people that you think I ought to know? Hey, Samantha, who's the top person in your area? Hey, Gemma, talk to me about what you all do in your particular area and how that actually relates to what I'm doing so that you have a network of somebody you can call in another area. But that's how you methodically start to build your network. And I have to tell you, Devin, given technology today, it's really easy to keep those relationships fertilized. You just simply put it in your calendar and put an alarm. It's February 9th. There's 3 phone calls or there's 3 emails I need to send today. Hey, Devin, how are you? Are you enjoying all this snow? Hey, Linda, man, I hope I get a chance to see you in the spring. And that's all you have to do. And the person may or may not answer you, but the fact that you have already had an inbound, they read it. It's in the file. So when you're ready to call them, it won't seem like it's been a year since you've connected.
Absolutely. Just fantastic advice there. I want to return, Carla, to our theme at LinkedIn this month, which is conversations for change. We talked a few minutes ago about having those difficult conversations. You had a great piece of advice there, which is that leaders need to start by just listening, being vulnerable, opening themselves up to listening. What's some other advice for those leaders out there who understand these issues are important, but aren't really engaging in those difficult conversations yet?
Yes, I'll tell you, there is a huge risk if you are not engaging in those conversations because millennials and Zers are really the reason why there's a huge change needed in leadership. They demand 3 things as table stakes. They demand transparency, inclusivity, and feedback. And one of the ways that you can show that you care about them is engaging in those conversations. And if you're not, you're going to miss valuable information that may cause you to not be able to retain some of your best talent. Millennials and Zers are much faster to walk than I would argue boomers or Xers were. So if you want to remain the employer of choice, you have to have that transparency, which is certainly about having that conversation. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to keep your best people. So if there's no other motivation, Devin, that's the one: retention.
Final question for you, Carla. We're seeing a lot of viewers really interested in the Multicultural Innovation Lab. They may just be learning about it for the first time. What are some of your goals for the lab this year, Carla, or over the next couple of years?
Yes, we have big goals for the lab this year. We are doubling the size of the lab. As you know, Devin, for the last 4 years, we've had 10 companies in per year. We're doing 2 cohorts this year for 20 companies. We also are investing outside of the lab opportunistically with companies that have been founded by women and people of color. And we're also trying to do a fund that will also invest in later stage. So we can not only be helpful for those companies while they're in the lab, but also be a friendly pool of capital among companies that will help these guys to scale before they actually have to go out into the broader market and attract different types of capital.
Well, it sounds like in many ways, Carla, your work is just getting started, even though you've been hard at work at this for decades now. I really want to thank you for your time today. The viewers in the stream loved your pearls of wisdom. Nicholas says, thank you, Ms. Harris, for your work within the financial institution framework. Your platform, your voice are critical. And Nicholas says, thank you. And Carla, I want to say thank you for joining us today on LinkedIn News Live.
All right. Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Devin. Bye-bye.
Take care. That was Carla Harris. She's Vice Chair of Global Wealth Management at Morgan Stanley and co-head of the Multicultural Innovation Lab. Don't forget to join us tomorrow. Emmy-winning news anchor Lindsay Davis will give us her take on representation in media. Plus, Silicon Valley has an equity problem, what venture capitalists can do to let in more women and people of color. I'm Devin Banerjee. Thank you again for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.